You've heard of the Blair Witch?
Several times.
I gave you back the map.
And it's all because of me that we're here now. Hungry, and cold, and hunted.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Nick.
Thank you all for joining us for our review of the Blair Witch Project, starring Heather Donahue, Josh Leonard, and Michael Williams, written and directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. We're going to get into the details of this, but first off, Nick, welcome to the Film Strip and Continuous Play universe, man.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell our audience what kind of stuff you tend to go for, what you watch.
I seem to go for everything, man. I appreciate a lot of all the movies out there. Probably my favorite one is probably Goodfellas. That's my favorite film. And probably the Alien series is right up there with that.
I'm a big Alien fan too, so that would be kind of fun to do. We may have to do that, but we wanted to get something that was a little bit more into the scare factor, and what a better way to do that here than in October. We wanted to pick some different kinds of thrillers and stuff, and so you and I had talked offline about it and kicked around a couple ideas, and we decided, hey, why not do the two Blair Witch films? Blair Witch Project came out in 1999, and at the time, everybody was talking about it was shot for like $20,000, and they made, $250 million on this thing, and it was people running around the woods. I mean, it was a phenomenon, man, when this movie came out. I just remember being in college at the time, everybody talking about this thing.
Yeah, I remember, I think I was 15 when this came out. Actually, when it came out, everybody actually believed in my high school that this was actually that this actually happened. And I remember just countless arguments about it where they're like, oh, that really happened. Yeah, these people are dead. They're missing. Families are going to sue the movie producers. And I'm kind of sitting back going, yeah, okay,
So it did start that whole found footage craze, though. I mean, that's still going today, man. Apollo 18 came out this summer, and I haven't seen that, but it's basically, the found Blair Witch footage of an Apollo mission to the moon that's attacked by something. I mean, really, this craze began with this movie, and how many other films have been influenced by it? They made a Halloween sequel that was basically found footage of people running around the house, with Michael Myers. So, we're going to get into it kind of proper here, but let's go through a quick plot summary, Nick, and we start breaking down the movie a bit.
Sure.
The basic run of this thing is pretty simple, folks. Student filmmakers Heather, Josh, and Mike venture into the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, a place used to be called Blair, and they're filming a documentary about the legend of the Blair Witch, who's credited with a string of heinous murders going back, almost 200 years. They visit a few spots where events are said to have taken place, but it just looks like, the woods. However, after a few days, it's pretty apparent that they have lost their way, and they soon find themselves surrounded by a terror that we can't see and we think we hear. One morning, Josh turns up missing, which sends Heather and Mike into a panic, and they continue to hear his cries in agony in the distance. This ultimately leads them to an old house in the woods. Mike enters in with one camera, hears Josh's screams in the basement, goes down there, and his camera falls over, and we see Mike no more. Heather follows quickly behind, and we see her with just a few seconds. She sees Mike facing a wall. She's hit. Her camera goes down, and credits roll. And that's really the whole movie. I mean, it's a pretty simple plot. And you said you were 15 when this came out.
Yep.
Like I said, I was in college, and I skipped it at theaters. I did not go for it. I actually wound up renting this when it came out that winter on video and watching it at home. Did you go see this in theaters?
I did, actually. I saw it opening weekend.
Oh, wow.
It was actually a whole family affair, believe it or not. I remember my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, we all went to go see it together. It was like we saw the movie, and I was getting sick during it, with all the shaky cam, and I almost puked probably a few times watching this. But I remember after the movie ended, we all went out to eat, and everybody I was with was just going on about how great the movie was, except for me.
So you didn't go for it the first time?
No, not at all. I was just like, guys, that was awful.
I'll tell you, as someone who grew up in the South and really grew up in the woods a lot, I was a Boy Scout, did all that stuff. I appreciated some of what they were going with, some of the scares, because if you've never been out in the wilderness on your own for a little while, I mean, there's noise out there that you just can't recreate anywhere else, and your mind will start to play with you. And I didn't know what the point of this movie was when the first time I saw it. And we can debate whether or not it has one later. but I remember thinking to myself, that would be scary if I hadn't spent any time out in Skymont, or out at Waterloo where I grew up and stuff. But, I'd done that. So that didn't really scare me. I remember seeing this and the shaky cam stuff. I mean, I'd heard all about that, and I remember getting a headache from it. But it didn't really affect me. I remember thinking about this movie for maybe 20 minutes after it was over, and then Nick, I had not watched this again until we watched it for this podcast. Of course, I've seen it, pieces of it on TV and stuff, and seen it parodied a billion times, but I remembered very little of it actually going in. I was sort of surprised when I watched it and started to put together the plot summary and stuff that there was a lot of this I did not remember. But I remembered one thing about it, that the story was really, really, really simple. That the whole thing was to watch three people in paranoia essentially lose their minds.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's always borrowed from a lot of different things. Probably most directly from the way Stanley Kubrick shot The Shining and the way you watch Jack Nicholson just sort of slowly lose it, over that period of time. And there's a number of other films that have done that, but I don't know, that was sort of my initial reaction to it too. So I didn't, going into this one, I didn't know what I'd think of it. Now, have you seen it since you saw it that time with your family?
Well, as you said, I watched it again for this podcast, but before that, I think I probably saw it once on like FX or something like that when it was going on. And I have to admit, though, as much as I thought the movie was kind of lousy the first time I saw it, it did scare the hell out of me.
Yeah?
It did. I remember, it's going to make me sound like kind of a wuss, but I remember I couldn't sleep for the next couple nights. Like, literally, I honestly, I normally, when I sleep, my bed's against the wall, and I normally kind of sleep facing the wall. I couldn't do that.
Oh, wow.
I was actually scared. I was scared that, something was actually going to come grab me. Or, whatever. Because, at the end of the movie with, the person with the facing the wall, that's kind of how I was envisioning myself with, sleeping against the wall.
Oh, wow. That is creepy. Woo.
Yeah, and I just, I felt like such a wuss. I mean, it took, weeks for me to get over it. And even though I kept on saying that movie was bad, it still scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, it still had an effect. Well, I will always argue as the horror fan that the things that always work best and are genuinely the scariest are the things that are really minimal in effort. Like, the thing that always creeped me out about The Shining was the music. And the way that music just sort of thumped in your head. And it's kind of the same way with Halloween. Like, that music always brings about a reaction in me when I see that.
Exactly.
And this film sort of works on that level too, though without any of that. And we should mention, from the get up of this, that, half the story of this is really how it got put together. It's all about the setup here. There's no music in this film. Everything that it's in it, music wise, is post-production, but they had none of that in the film proper. There's some noises at the front and at the end of it, but there's no music in it. So you're asking improvisational actors to go into the woods with two cameras and shoot each other going to different places with no dialogue, only with the basic direction of, you have to not talk to him today, and you have to act like you want to get away from her. And I mean, that's a lot to put on, improvisational actors. So, I mean, what do you make of the whole setup of this, the whole bit, the student filmmakers found footage bit?
I think it's a pretty novel idea. I mean, at least, this seemed like it's the first one that really came out that used that idea. And like I said before, I think the whole approach of this movie, I think, really brought people into the movie theater, because I still think a lot of people thought it was real. With the way the whole thing was filmed, with it being stock footage, and the whole marketing campaign for this was basically that this really happened. I remember even the Sci-Fi Channel had a documentary about the actual movie. Kind of like a faux documentary about the Blair Witch, and these people were missing and how they found the film, it was in a pile of rocks and stuff. And I think just that mixed in with how the film was shot really kind of made it such a novelty type movie that it brought everybody in.
Well, it became its own urban legend before it ever hit the theater.
It did, yeah, correct, yeah.
Yeah, I remember distinctly this being one of the first films that was heavily marketed on the internet. In 1999, the internet was still pretty new to most of us. Websites were nothing like they are today. I mean, every film today has a website 2 years before it comes out. You can go to the Avengers website right now. And I mean, they're built before they're ever.
Yeah, I think the Avengers
shot.
2 is out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but back then in the late 90s, having a website for the film was usually an afterthought. That was something that was put together for like the video campaign, for the DVD campaign. Well, this came out beforehand, and like you said, they had the faux documentaries, and that documentary is actually on the disc that I bought, by the way. So I watched a little bit of that, and I remember seeing that. But this film really was all about word of mouth, because if you look at its box office performance, it wasn't until about the third or fourth week that it really started clipping into the high numbers. And it was never number one at the box office, but it turned in double-digit million weekends for about 6 in a row of its run after it started really slow, because people saw it and they kept telling people about it. And you talked about it at school, and you talked about it in class, and you talked about it at the bar and at the coffee shop. And it was everywhere you went, there was somebody talking about this movie. So it was really a genius way to market a film. And to their credit, I don't know how they pulled this off. Apparently, maybe the actors aren't that in demand, but you couldn't find those people anywhere. So you couldn't know if they were real or not, if they really were alive or dead. And I don't know how they pulled that off. I don't know that you could even do that.
No, with the
today.
IMDb's and everything, you couldn't do that today.
It'd be almost impossible to try that again. But it does leave a mystique with the film of how real it is or not. Matter of fact, I was only totally convinced that at least some of it wasn't based on something when I saw all three of them at some awards show, a year later, and I said, oh, well, okay, clearly they're all, doing other things now. So anyway, I guess we should get into this proper and sort of what this one's a little different than most of the film reviews we do, because there's not really a plot to walk through. I mean, it's three people walking in the woods. I guess we just kind of hit some of the highlights here, but they start out and they're shooting this faux documentary, or this documentary in the town. And I did like the way how they introduced the characters. Josh and Heather apparently know each other and have some comfortability with each other. And Mike is the new one. Did you get that?
Actually, I didn't. I thought they were like three like school friends. But now that you mention it, though, it does kind of seem like Mike's kind of the odd one out as the movie kind of goes along with how he reacts to everything Heather does.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't know her, he knows Josh, but of course Josh knows them both. He's the thing that sort of ties them to Heather and Mike to each other. And I do think that makes for an interesting dynamic when Josh is removed from the group, and now you have these two people that are really just strangers to each other, and what their roles are too. And we get into some of the film school stuff in a bit, but I did like the setup. And they're walking around this town and they're talking to people, and I don't know, like, are these actors that are planted, or are these real people in town? How did they go about getting these people in town to sort of go along with this story?
Yeah, from what I read from the IMDb pages, it seems like they basically just got people off the street or kind of family friends or friends of theirs to just kind of like play along with them. They kind of gave them like some literature on the Blair Witch and kind of what to go off on, But I think actually the first part of the movie is actually my favorite, with them all talking, to like the townspeople and just hearing their stories, especially the religious woman when she was recounting her, seeing the Blair Witch and, how hairy she was and how she opened up her, gown or whatever she was wearing. I actually found that kind of creepy.
It is. It's a real creepy setup. And I don't know that I was ever genuinely scared watching this movie anytime I've seen it, but there is a real creep factor to it. And I almost think it's one of those things that especially if you're watching it by yourself, if you're, brave enough to kick all the lights off and really just sit and let yourself be absorbed into it, this is the part of the story that's either going to sell you on what's going to happen for the last, 60 minutes of it or not. Because the first 20 minutes of it is where they set up all the important information. You get everything you need to know. Everything from there's been hundreds of years that this woman, was allegedly a witch, and that woman talking about the furry witch lady that whose feet never touch the ground and all that, to the story about the guy who made the kids face in the corner because he couldn't stand them to watch him while he killed one of them, all of that stuff. And it is really creepy to hear all that. I liken that to my memories of unsolved mysteries. When I used to watch that show as a kid with my grandmother, because that was something she loved to watch, I would get so creeped out by that show, but I couldn't stop watching it. I was like drawn to it. But to this day, when I hear Robert Stack's voice or I hear that music, there's an instant chill that sort of comes over me. And I think that's the kind of scare they're playing for here.
I think it's actually a really great way, too, to get all the exposition out for the movie right away. Because, like, in a way, like, you know, with all the people telling their stories, you're getting, like, the whole history of the Blair Witch Project in the first, like, you know, 20 minutes of the film, where later in the movie, they're not burdened with having to tell the audience, you know, like, what's going on with, like, the 7 rocks that are, you know, rock piles that are on the tent, where the guy in the beginning kind of explains that with the 7 kids that were killed and how that kind of relates back to that. Whereas, you know, another type of movie would kind of go in exposition right there saying, oh, these must be represent the 7 kids that were killed. But you get that right away in the film.
Well, it's a big gamble by the filmmakers, but it's something to endear an audience to you. If you trust your audience to be smart enough to pick up on this stuff and hang on to it going forward, then you can throw little bits of it out here and there as they're wandering around lost in the woods, and people will go, oh, that's just like when the guy said, or, you know, even at the end when you see that one flash of him standing in the corner, all of it floods back, right? You know, so, and that's a really smart way to write a film. And I will credit this script for having the guts to do that. We're going to give you the story in 20 minutes, and then we're going to take these people in the woods, and the minute they get out of that car and go in the woods, there's no more exposition. It's them arguing with each other.
And that's all it is. You know, it's like the whole rest of the movie is just basically character building. You're getting to know each of them personally and stuff, but then everything they run into runs back, you know, brings up the exposition that was brought up in the first 20 minutes of the movie, which, you know, watching it again, I really, really thought that was a clever way of making the film.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of my favorite bits of it is it's at the end of the first day when they've gone to Coffin Rock and they hear about the 5 men that went looking for missing children, and they all got tied to each other in their entrails and all this, you know, I mean, just the weirdest story. And these 2 fishermen are telling it. And you got one of them who's going, yeah, everybody knows this place has been haunted for years, and the other one calls bullshit on it. But they are standing back to back to one another. Now, anybody that's ever done any hunting or fishing, the only reason you ever do that is so you can protect each other from things you can't see. Now, that to me was a neat little drop that these 2 guys look at it differently, but yet both of them are very aware of where they are at that moment. And I thought that was kind of cool. I mean, again, it's another one of those little things to sprinkle in there for the audience that maybe on the first time through you don't catch it, but you watch it again and you go, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was a very, very good point of the movie. And actually, I thought that was probably my favorite part of the movie was actually those 2 guys fishing. Because it had some, you know, some comedy in there with just kind of ripping on the guy as he's telling a story. And, you know, it's so real life right there. Because, you know, how many times are you around a friend who's telling a story and you're kind of like, yeah, he's exaggerating, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, everybody's heard that, especially, you know, the fish story. I mean, to frame it around that act is perfect. And someone grew up fishing. I mean, you always hear these things. It was a great time for stories. But there was always one guy that would tell something and was totally buying it, and the other one that's like, yeah, right. But even the guy that says, yeah, right, is still doing things that lets you know that he's not an idiot either. He's not standing off by himself.
Yeah, his body language doesn't match what he's saying.
Yeah, which to me that would be the reaction of somebody who grew up around that area, you know? You know how it's like the kids that grew up in Haddonfield, right? Nobody went to the Strode house, you know, or to the Myers house.
Well, unless
it didn't sell for 20 years for a reason. Yeah, you know, only after some people had been killed, right? But I mean, really, you know, there are people who would stay away from things. You can pick that out in any horror movie. You know, they're out there, and I like the fact that they're introducing they're borrowing all of these tropes, Nick, but they're using them in a real unique way, and like we've said, they're doing it compressed. Because I mean, if I'm watching this movie the first time, I don't know what we're doing yet. You know, is this going to be the whole thing? You know? And if it were, I think it would be neat, but I'll tell you, I don't know that they could have sustained this. I think after that first day is when they have to start changing the dynamic of the film, and they wisely do.
Yep, I completely agree.
So they get out in the woods. I think that the key to the second day is Heather's first admission that she got them lost the first day and went off the map. But I did it on purpose, you know? And I've heard Heather Donahue talk about the way she framed her character was an experience of working with another director who could do anything as long as he had planned it out. But if it got off of that plan, it was just haywire. And just couldn't take it, but always tried to maintain this sense of control. And I think the first thing you get is that Heather is a control freak.
Oh, definitely. She actually, I mean, out of the 3 characters, she was the one that annoyed me the most. Just like her controlling aspect. You know, we've all known someone like that. It was just like they take control even when they don't even know what they're doing. And that's what I got from her, is that she's taking control of this film. She wants it done her way, even though she doesn't know what's going on.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I get the feeling that Josh is trying to be her friend and he's trying to support her, but at the same time he's wondering, why are we lost? And Mike is just calling her out on it.
Yeah, and I think Mike actually, I think he's a representation of the audience, I believe.
Yeah,
because like the whole time he's screaming like, "You're getting us lost," what are you doing? It's exactly what you're feeling. It's like, what is she doing?
Yeah, and I think that it's an interesting way to look at the film, because up until this point, like we say, it's been very exposition heavy. Now everything switches to Heather's point of view, because she's on screen less than any of them, but she has more lines than both of them combined.
Yep.
So you hear her voice and you see her point of view, but you don't see her as much as you see the other guys. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really neat way to do it, because then she becomes this force behind the scenes that the audience can lash out on. Because I'm with you, man. She was the most annoying thing in the film. Besides the shaky cam, her and just the way she comes off, it just grates on you. But I think it's supposed to.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's supposed to. I mean, I read a lot of reviews about the movie, kind of ripping on her performance and everything. But I think she played the part the way it was supposed to be played. You're not supposed to like her.
Yeah, exactly. You're not supposed to like her. I don't know if you're supposed to like any of these people. I think maybe you're supposed to relate to Mike because he's your avatar as the audience, but I don't know that you can really relate to Josh. We don't know anything about him.
Yeah, Josh is kind of a mystery character, but yeah, you're right with Mike. I mean, Mike is saying what we're all feeling throughout the movie. It's, yelling at Heather, yelling at Josh, and yeah, I mean, the whole time I was just agreeing with everything Mike said up until, I think it was like third day.
Yeah.
That, we'll get to that, but that's when I think the movie kind of, deviates from, believability to okay.
It starts getting a little weird there, yeah. But before we get there, we got to hit a lot of stuff. They're walking around, and Heather is they have the big 16 millimeter camera that Josh is carrying around, and she's shooting everything, because she's trying to gather footage. Now, any good cinematographer, anybody that's ever directed a film, I had a chance to be a part of a student film once when I was in college, and I understand the idea of you want to always shoot more, because you can never have too much. It's easier to cut than it is to recreate. But she's shooting everything, and it's starting to wear on these other two guys. But she's the one that's noticing all the clues. So while Mike may be our avatar for our attitude and how we feel, Heather's the one that's still feeding us information. Mm-hmm. The piles of rocks. I mean, is that a cemetery? All of that kind of stuff. The things that she's noticing, we're seeing through her lens.
Yep. Now, what did you take the pile of rocks meaning?
Man, I don't know. The first time I saw this, I just took it as it was just piles of rocks, and then later on, I thought maybe this is part of the ritual of whatever is attacking them or chasing them. Now I look at it, and it's almost like these are markers of graves. I think you could read it that way. I mean, what did you think?
I thought it was a representation of the story that the one guy told in the beginning of the film with the 7 kids, because they did count out 7 piles of rocks. Yeah. So that's what I took from it, was they stumbled upon, whether it was actual a grave, the bodies were, I don't think the bodies were buried. I think they said they found the bodies, but I think those are just kind of representations of the kids that were killed.
Yeah. Ooh. I mean, I'm having a flashback as we talk about this. I remember, if you've ever seen the TV version of the Stephen King book, It, mm-hmm. and the graves that Pennywise has dug while Bill is visiting his brother's grave, and it's one for every one of them that he's going to kill, that's in the book, too. And I thought about that as I watched this movie, and it flashed in my head again, is it's very much that idea of how evil will just screw with you.
Yep.
It'll just put things out there to let you know that I'm watching you. And I don't know if that's how we're supposed to read this or not, but if you're paying attention and keeping up with this and you see that, it definitely brings back that creepy factor that you haven't had for 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, with me, actually, I thought more like the piles of rocks were actually kind of like a warning in a way. They're going out in the woods and they're, looking for this thing, and that's almost kind of like you're stumbling upon what already happened, and it's almost like in a way just being a warning to them, like, okay, stop, don't go any further. But, they keep on going further, obviously.
Yeah, well, because they're not going to stop. I mean, that's the whole point,
Yeah.
right? And then that night in the tent, we hear all the noises in the dark, which, I mean, if you ever spent any time out, all those crackling, sounds and wood breaking and rocks moving and stuff, that can really start to creep you out if you've never heard it. And they do this genius thing in the film is we got to turn off all the lights, no fire, no nothing. And they turn the camera light off. So all you hear is them talking in the dark, which immediately you've now just thrown the audience into the pitch black with them, which I thought was a great move.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually very surprised with that, that they'd actually do that, just basically just do nothing but like an audio track, And I thought that was very, very effective because as I was watching it for this podcast, I watched it in my bedroom on my laptop, and I pretty much watched it in the pitch black, and that actually started to get to me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it will. It does, because you're in the blackness with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you get the little goosebumps going on when that's going on, where it's like, yeah, that is kind of creepy with those noises, like what's going on out there? Is that, your mind starts, filling in the blank, and that's one of the things I kind of love about a lot of like lower budget horror movies is they don't show you what's going on. We're like your imagination's filling in those gaps, and I'm sorry to say, but your imagination's 10 times scarier than anything they could ever show on film.
You know what you're talking about, Nick? I read a real neat critique of this film once that compared a lot of it to Macbeth, and I won't get into all of that, but there's a quote in Macbeth that says, "Present fears are less than horrible imaginings." And I don't know if they're intentionally doing this or not, but that's the same thing you're talking about. What's actually real is nothing compared to what my mind thinks it is. And they're playing with that in just a short little snap here in this. And I thought it is a great move. I mean, it really engages the audience when you've given them exposition and then you've given them, 15 minutes of really nothing happening. People just walking around kind of fussing at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give them just a few minutes of scare. And then the next day they wake up and it's raining and they're trying to figure out what happened. And they are clearly deeper in the woods. And I love the whole bit about, have you ever seen Deliverance? Because they're convinced it's locals who are playing it against them. Now, you talk about the power of a film to change people's perceptions. I don't know if you've ever seen Deliverance or not, but you'll never go in the woods the same again or on a canoe trip the same again if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, I've seen Deliverance, yep. That's why I'll never go camping, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, but they're playing with that idea again. They're introducing something to the audience. It's a misdirect, right? Well, is it just a bunch of locals trying to ward them off?
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you buy that at all?
No, I didn't. I didn't buy that at all. Just because, I don't know. It just, anytime like when the back to the scene with the darkness, what went to my mind was the exposition that we got in the first 20 minutes of the film. Was, when they're hearing the noises, my mind's going to the story that the old religious, crazy lady was saying with the hairy woman and, the above the ground and the floating and stuff. That's what I was kind of imagining when I was hearing those noises. So even when he went back and was talking about like, all these could be, crazy rednecks or whatever, it's just like, because of the exposition that they got in the movie, I just didn't buy that. I never thought it was anything to do with rednecks and stuff. I thought that was Mike in a way acting almost like in denial.
I think you've hit it because if he's supposed to be the voice of the audience, then he's that last bit. They're the last ones to come along, right? We'd be the last ones to come along for the journey, and Mike would be that guy. He's got no tie to this project other than he got hired in essentially to do the sound for it.
Yeah.
And he's already kind of said that, this isn't what I come out here for.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to, distance himself and come up with the rational explanation while the other two aren't really sure what's happening. Heather probably leaning more toward where it all goes up to this point. But again, she's the voice of everything. So
in a way, too, I think I think that Mike was still on the same page with Heather and Josh, but I think that he was basically saying like, rednecks, Deliverance, almost in a way that he was not accepting what was going on. He was almost trying to kid himself by saying that. That's what I was getting by him, just being like, oh, it's rednecks or something. And I think just deep down inside, he knew that wasn't the case.
Oh, yeah, just a little humor to try to lighten himself up so that he could get ready to move on.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is they're going back a different way. And Heather keeps throwing out that 2 hours max we're going to be there. And they're really just walking in a big circle. Now, they don't realize that yet, but they're lost.
Yeah.
And then we get into the whole bit about the map. We got to have the map.
Oh, this is my word. The worst part of the movie by far is the map.
I'm with you. I wanted that map. I'm like, this map has now become everything in this movie for about 10 minutes. And it goes on and on too long. And I don't know if the idea is that we're seeing people who are coming to the end of their rope with each other and they're getting a little ticked off with each other and that's supposed to fracture the group or what. I don't know what the point of that part of the story was, because ultimately they wind up coming back together multiple times and breaking up more times. So I don't know why we had to introduce this 3 days in.
I can see what they were trying to do. I think this was supposed to be kind of the breaking point for them, where it was like, they lose the map, and that was like their one thing that they had, their one hope to get out of this mess was that map, and now the map's gone. And I think that was supposed to be the breaking point, where it's like, it's downhill, it's, the breaking point for these characters. But, they could have done it so well, too. And the way I thought it was going to end, it didn't end like that. That Mike kicked it into the, the stream is probably the dumbest thing in the whole film.
Yeah, there's no reason for him to have done that at all.
And I think that point right there, because like I was saying, that Mike was kind of the character, the audience. And at that point right there, he completely rips himself from being the audience, because the audience wouldn't do that.
No, like I could have bought it if Josh had lost it because he looks like a pothead, or they just lost the dang thing.
See, I thought it was creepy, though. I thought it was creepy at first because she was saying it was in her pocket and then it was gone.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, how did he get it to kick it then? Because I never saw Mike with it.
Yeah, Mike would have never got the map, and I think that's just like the biggest insult in the whole movie is the whole map thing. And I think it honestly would have been really great if it just disappeared. They didn't have any explanation for it. It was like it was just the Blair Witch. Somehow it just disappeared. And maybe even later in the movie they might find little traces of it or something like that, almost like it's mocking them about the map. But just to have Mike admit that he threw it in the stream, it makes no sense for the character, and it makes no sense for the movie. It makes no sense for the situation they're in.
Why would he do that? Why would he, ever have it? And why would he do it? And if you're doing it just so you can have all of them go at each other in a real violent way, well, you don't need that. I didn't need them to then decide we're going to tag team on Mike.
Yeah.
And there was enough contempt built up for Heather that everybody's against her at this point in the audience. And most people are just kind of with Josh. Mike's our voice, but when Mike, like you said, when Mike kicks the map or admits to kicking the map, you're going, well, why did you do that, moron? Now the audience no longer has an avatar.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if they would have even let's say Josh was the one that lost the map, it would have made so much more sense in a way, because, Josh ends up going missing. So you could almost add that aspect. Did he take off because he was ashamed that he lost the map? You could add so many different more aspects into it. But by making Mike kick it in the river, I mean, that was just, at that point, that really took me out of the film, because it was something that it's almost like in like a slasher movie. Why is she running upstairs? It's just one of those moments where it's just like, it's brain-numbingly dumb.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all why you would go that direction when clearly the answer's over here. I'm with you. Yeah, it takes you out of it.
Yeah, and like I said, there's so many other places they could have went with it too, and they did the worst possible scenario for that.
We don't need that. It sets up a 10-minute stretch of the film that doesn't need to be there, because what you're doing is, I realize they're trying to kill daylight so they can get back to night and do more weird stuff and pile rocks outside of the tent and all that kind of stuff. But I'm with you. It would have been better if Josh had been the one that lost it or took it or whatever, and then he goes missing, and then those two go, what if he stole the map and has ditched us?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that sets up tension and stuff. It really undercuts a lot of it. I like that. But they do win it back pretty quick, because they wake up the next morning. Well, they have the night where it's more sound and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and all that stuff. And they wake up and they see these piles of rocks outside of the tent. And there's 3 piles. Now, you called it out earlier. There were 7 piles for the kids that got killed. Now there are 3 piles. Are those supposed to be grave markers or what?
I think it's a representation that you guys are screwed. You guys are not getting out of here. You guys are dead. I think that's what that meant, is that 3 rocks, 3 people. Yeah. And that's what it is.
I gave you the warning. You didn't heed it, so now... Well, right before Mike admits to kicking the map in the creek, though, they do wake up outside of the tent, and there's these piles of rocks outside of the tent, and there's 3 of them. Is that another warning or what?
Yeah, I don't think it's a warning. I think it's basically a representation that they're gone. I think that's what it is. I think at that point, whatever the entity is, the Blair Witch, whatever's going at, messing around with them, was giving them warnings beforehand. And this is like basically they crossed the line now. And I think that's what the 3 piles of rock meant, is that those are your grave markers. You're done.
So that they see those things, then they go through the whole bit with Mike and the map issue, and then they run into the stick figures everywhere. Now that is one of the creepiest things about this movie. The straw man, the stick man, whatever you want to call it, the little 5-pointed stick man that sort of become the symbol of the Blair Witch Project. Yeah,
that's a great symbol. It really is, because you see that even now, you know what that means. I mean, someone shows you the 5 stick figure, and you know that's the Blair Witch. I think that was just a really great moment in the film. And actually, from what I read about the film, was the cast didn't even know about those.
Yeah, they sprung it on them, which is even better. And Nick, you pull them back the curtain here a little bit. You do a lot of design and graphic design and artwork for a living. That's a great piece of art.
It is. It's wonderful, and I love you got the different sizes out there. You got the bigger ones, you got the smaller ones, and they really look. They're all made out of the materials that you'd find in the woods. So it's really, I think it's that right there. Besides the opening, 20 minutes of the film, is probably my next favorite part of the film. It's just them finding that and just again realizing we're in over our head right now.
Well, it's also a payoff. You hear all these breaking sticks in the night, and then in the morning you see the fruition of the broken sticks. Yeah. Whatever or whoever has fashioned them in these shapes.
That's true. I didn't even actually put that together. That's a really good point. I didn't put that together with the breaking sticks and putting them together. It seems so obvious now.
Yeah, well, and now the film doesn't tell us that. I'm just going with it because I'm thinking for a payoff, though, as an audience member who's trying to follow this and sort of absorb it as I go, that's a payoff.
It is. That is a great payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you usually don't get those payoffs in the middle of the movie. You get them at the end. Well, again, they feed it to us just a little bit at a time, which is genius. And I mean, it really works well. I mean, it makes, again, for something ominous going on, they don't know what's happening. But that night, they hear the voices of children outside of the tent and other noises and stuff like that. Now, that was creepy.
Yeah, that again was a great scene. I mean, like I said, the movie kind of went downhill a little bit with the map thing, and right away it gets brought back up with the stick figures, and then the whole, again, with the night scene. I believe this is where they're running at night, correct?
Yeah, they get out and start running after whatever is out there.
Yeah, and just even just even talking about it, I almost get kind of goosebumps thinking about Heather's reaction as she's running and just kind of screaming, "What is that? What is that over there?" And you can't see it. The camera's moving, and you're hoping just, move the camera over to the left. I want to see what she's talking about, and it doesn't do it. And again, it goes back to the whole thing of, again, your imagination's filling in that gap right there.
Well, that trick has been used forever, right? It's what you don't see, but is implied that there's the terror. And that's the real. I mean, that's the real hook of a movie like Jaws, even today, right? Is that you don't see the show.
Yeah, Jaws.
And I know that that's all part of the happy accident of that movie, that they couldn't really make it work, so they didn't show it as much as they wanted. But that adds to the terror. And now they're borrowing that here, and it is this big tease of what is going to be seen, what is really there.
Yeah.
It's like Michael Myers' shadow is just behind the bush. If you watch Halloween once, you may miss it, but if you watch it a bunch of times, his face is behind everything. He's watching these people all day. Throughout the day, and you maybe only remember a couple of the most memorable scenes where you've seen it, but if you watch that movie, he's everywhere, and that adds to the creep factor.
Exactly. I completely agree. You just don't see what's going on, and it's just like it's creepy. It's creepy. This scene right here really creeped me out as well. I mean, as soon as it was over, I was actually kind of relieved because it was pretty intense.
Oh yeah, I mean, it really is. And now the thing we got to mention, when they saw the stick figures earlier, Heather took one of the small ones, and I immediately thought, why are you taking that? And I know as a character why she would do it. She's the director. She's trying to direct something. She's trying to come up with something, right? So she's the reporter. She's always gathering information. But as a human being, I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't either. And I think it was actually another kind of a missed opportunity with the movie, because you could have set up a little bit more of a, dynamic between her and Mike, or even Josh, but probably Mike if he found out that she took that.
Yeah, and they do that again later on after Josh goes missing. They miss these opportunities sometimes in this movie, and it just, the mark of the first-time filmmakers is that they're missing.
Yeah.
And, they wake up the next day, and Josh's stuff is what has been messed with.
Yep.
And I immediately asked myself, why did he get singled out?
Yeah, I kind of saw where it was going because I knew that it wouldn't be the three of them. And I kind of figured this was kind of the first, clue that he's the first one that's going to get targeted. And it turned out I was right with that.
I don't know what it is about him that makes him the easiest target or the first target, but I never got why he was targeted first. But it immediately raised the stakes because by saying that now, by invading his personal space in a real way, you now know that this evil is not just going to leave stick figures and rocks for him.
Yeah, now it's, messing with him personally. And I think the reason they decided to go with Josh being the one missing was because, Mike was, again, the audience and Heather was the main character. So I think Josh was kind of that one that was kind of left out in a way.
Well, but for a brief moment, they allowed Josh to now be the audience because he turns the camera on Heather. And he does that whole, we're still making movies, aren't we, Heather? And he just goes off on her. And she loses it.
Yeah.
She really gets attacked. And Mike comes to her defense, which is an odd dynamic to set up. But you can tell Josh has really lost him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is the first one that has completely flipped. And for a minute there, I wanted to feel sorry for Heather because even though she is contemptible, and most of this is her fault, and she's doing things that you shouldn't do, I don't know that she deserved that either. You can tell, and I don't know if maybe they did that on purpose to try to bring us back around to her side for a little bit because they know they're about to take Josh out of the dynamic and we're going to have to follow somebody. Mm-hmm. And she's the one with all the dialogue.
Yeah, I think another point that they missed in the movie is I think after Josh left, and then you kind of see the way, Heather's breaking down and almost like losing her sanity in a way, is it really could have took an opportunity to have Mike become the main character. They could have done like a little switcheroo right there because he does hold the camera through a lot of the rest. The remainder of the movie, he has basically half the camera time, especially when they get to the house. So it could have been really a great opportunity for the filmmakers to give Mike the starring role for the rest, last 20 minutes of the film. Because again, it's the audience is, along for the ride, and Mike is the audience.
Right. But they do one last misdirect with us here with Josh. That night in the tent, they're not even saying they're sorry anymore. They're just talking and being jokey with each other. And I miss mashed potatoes and cheeseburgers. I got a cheeseburger in my back pocket. They're all kind of cool with each other again.
Yeah.
For a minute. They're trying to be neat. But then the next morning, Heather wakes up and she's like, I just want everyone to see Mike is right here and he's dead asleep. And she goes outside and Josh is gone and don't know where he is. Just poof. And I thought, wow, now we've really raised the stakes. Yeah, and they basically spend the whole day waiting for him. They don't go anywhere.
Yeah, which I think that's completely believable because, if he's disappeared, let's say he went off to go, do number one in the woods or something, he may have just got lost or something. So of course they're going to stay where they are and hope that maybe he finds his way back. But I think deep down inside though, especially from like their facial reactions and everything, they kind of thought that something happened.
Yeah. And I mean, the camera's left behind, but his stuff is gone.
Yeah.
Which, why leave the camera? So that lets you know as an audience, well, it's clearly not people because anything of value like that, somebody would have stolen. Mm-hmm. This is something else. And then that night, of course, they immediately pay that off because you hear Josh screaming in the night and they go running out into the darkness.
Yeah, that's another great scene was with that. I mean, just hearing him scream just in the background and they can't tell where it's coming from. It's almost like it's coming from around him completely.
Yeah.
It's in front of you, it's in back of you, it's to the right, it's to the left of you, and they just can't zone in on where he's coming from. And that I think adds so much more to the terror again because you're not seeing what's going on. So you're so disoriented, it's just like you're running through the woods. Exactly. Yeah, I think, it's a great moment in the movie. I think, it's probably something to do with the low budget that they can't really show you what's going on. But, if you had a director like Eli Roth or something doing it, I mean, he would have showed you every little, every little thing that was going through him plus more. But I think,
yeah,
that's why I don't like his movies. And I like something more like this where it's, again, it creeps you out a heck of a lot more that you don't know what's going on.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, if you had handed this to Rob Zombie, we'd be, drinking out of somebody's skull, right?
Yeah, Heather would be a stripper and Mike would be a redneck and, Josh would be a meth dealer.
Exactly. I mean, it would be a completely different dynamic if somebody like that had a hold of this. But, they're running around, they're hearing him scream in the night, and they're sitting there, and it ends with them back to where they started, and they're sitting there talking to each other going, don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep. Because they're both afraid they're going to wake up and one of the other one's going to be gone, right?
Or they might be the one that's gone.
Yeah. I mean, it's something's going to happen. But of course, they do wake up and, They're both still there, and Heather sees this bundled pile of sticks, held together by pieces of Josh's shirt. And Mike is over there like rocking back and forth, which is, he's lost it. Heather unwraps that bundle, and are those cut off fingers? Because that's how I've always seen that.
I saw that as teeth.
I don't know what it is, but it's this bloody pile of something.
Yeah.
And she completely flips out. But she doesn't tell Mike. Why not at that point?
I think, again, for the audience, it's right now, you're saying it's fingers, I'm saying it's teeth. We don't really know, because they don't hold the camera on it for more than like 4 seconds. So you don't know what that is. And I think that's the reason why she never says, oh yeah, that's his fingers in there or something like that. It's so much more creepy not knowing what that was, except for knowing that, that's something that shouldn't have been in there. That's something that was a part of Josh. But you don't know what it is, and I think that just adds so much more to the creepiness of the whole movie is, just not knowing.
And then a number bit of symbolism here, and it sets up what happens that night. Heather washes the blood off of her hands in the creek, and she just keeps talking to herself in sort of this rhythmic, it's going to be okay, we're just going to keep moving, I'm going to be okay, she keeps doing that, and all of that plays up to that night, which is probably the most famous scene in the movie, is that teary apology of her looking into the camera. Now, on one level, it's like, wipe your nose, chick, but on the other side of it, when you look at it in context, it all makes sense. Oh, it does,
the way she's apologizing to their moms, because at that point is when her character completely takes responsibility for everything that's happening. She's completely because she's hoping that someone's going to see this film eventually, and she's apologizing to everybody, saying, this is my fault. I screwed up. I am so sorry for everything. And it's a good scene and a bad scene, in my opinion. Like you said, wipe your nose. Heather's not a very attractive woman, so it is kind of hard when you got the extreme close up looking at all her pores and everything. But but it is a good scene. It's just not. I don't think it's very filmed.
It's not shot well, and I think there could have been other ways to do it. But I like the emotion and the raw emotion of it. Maybe without the extreme close up, it would be a little less annoying to watch.
Yeah.
But if you just sort of let it suck in, the last thing she says is what really says it all. I'm sorry, I was very naive, and now we're out here hungry, cold, and hunted. She knows there's no way they're getting out alive.
Yep.
She knows that they've crossed that line.
Yep. I think at that point, she basically, did what the audience has done from, probably 20 minutes prior, as they added up everything, the rocks, the stick figures, Josh being gone, dismembered body parts, and now I think she just knows that she's done. And I think it's just her just, basically giving her last will and testament.
That's a good way to say it. And wisely, they don't let that linger at all, because boom, she hears a noise and just shudders. Just that look on her face and the fact she starts shaking, and they both go, what was that? And then they hear Josh clearly in the distance.
Yep.
And, before it's like, could that be Josh? Was that Josh? It kind of sounded like Josh. It is very much that actor doing that voice.
Yep.
In the distance, and it's closer because it's loud.
Yep.
They grab a camera, they run to investigate, and they come upon the house.
And it's a great setup. It's, perfect as to why they would go into this house. But the big thing is, why would they bring the cameras in?
Well, at that point, and you make a good point there. Why bring the cameras? But Heather makes a point at least twice earlier on that, well, I'm just wanting this to get captured because this is a thing. We're going to look, at first she says, we're going to look back on this and laugh about it, But at some point, I think she realizes that we're making either our last will and testament, or at least a record of what has happened to us out here. And I think Mike buys that too. Otherwise, he would have grabbed that camera and chucked it in the woods.
Yeah.
Now, there's another reason you could also use the practical. There's a big light on top of the 16 millimeter.
That's true. That's true.
So that you could use that as logic too. But I'm with you. Why take the cameras? Well, why not? You've taken them through all of this.
Yeah. But me looking at it though, it's like, if I heard my friend in there, it's like, I'm dropping the camera and I'm going in there, grabbing the biggest stick I can and just, praying for the best, even though I probably know that nothing good's going to come out of it. But I just think the camera, obviously they have to have the camera because of the film. But I just think, that would really be kind of the last priority in the whole thing. I mean, your friend's crying, probably getting killed, or whatever thoughts are going through your head. Camera is not what you need.
And I'm with you. I don't think you're wrong. At this point, though, I'm willing to give them this, if for nothing more than the light that's on the camera. If that's all I've got to go with, I'm willing to go with it. But I think at this point they've earned the craziness to take a camera with them to go after their friend one last time. At least for me as an audience member, I want to see it too.
And I can see it from Heather's point of view though too, because Heather's she's still out there with the whole wanting to document everything. But Mike taking the camera, that's kind of hard to get in a way, because Mike was always before that like, why the hell are you filming this? Why are you doing this? Turn off the camera. Now suddenly he has the camera.
Yeah, it is a little odd, and I guess it's because they're going to get separated in that house, and they want you to see the 2 points of view of what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And it does allow them, and the directors talk about this in the commentary track, which I don't recommend anyone listen to. But if you were to do so, what they do a lot of in this film, but particularly in this house, is you see Mike's point of view, but you hear Heather talking. Mm-hmm. So it's his camera picking her up and then vice versa.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of that to disorient you in the house. That was one of their tricks. And I mean, what a weird, creepy, cool house. I mean, you got the kids' handprints.
Yeah, that was really creepy.
God, that is just weird. I mean, it just gives me goosebumps talking about it.
I mean, was that blood? Or what was that?
I don't know. That's the thing. It's because it's shot on that 16. It's black and white.
Yeah, was it dirt? Was it blood? I mean, and then you remember also, only back to the exposition part of the first 20 minutes of, there's 7 kids in that house that got killed. Those are obviously those kids, And it just it adds a whole. I mean, it's all going through the back of your mind as you're watching this. Mike
runs downstairs, chasing the voice of Josh, comes around a corner, and boom, and his camera's on the ground.
Yeah.
So
it's a good scene, but then just thinking back about it in retrospect, it's just there's so many problems I have with it. Why they would run into the house with the cameras, why once they get in the house they would separate, stay together. And then, but again, I understand what the filmmakers are trying to do. And again, I think it's just kind of they're first-time filmmakers, and all this falls into them just,
Well, they had a lot of different endings shot for this, and all of it is pointing up so Heather can chase that noise into there, and she's the one that gets the final shot where we see Mike standing in the corner. Remember, the kid one stands in the corner and doesn't look while the other one's killed, and then Heather goes down and her camera's running, and that's it. And it's all to set that up. In some of the reshot stuff, I mean, she runs into Mike crucified essentially on the stick figure thing in multiple variations.
Oh, man, that would have been terrible
stuff. See, and that would have been horrible. And I agree. If they'd have put that in there, that would have been really cheap. That I'd have hated that. I don't really care for the way the ending goes now, but that would have been the wrong move in a movie that's been so subtle. That would have been Eli Roth or Rob Zombie.
Yeah, that would have been exorcism of or the last exorcism type ending where it's just like, where did this come from?
Yeah, it comes out of nowhere. Yeah, it's just that's weird, But what about that ending, particularly Heather's point of view ending? I think we're both right that Mike's is not terribly satisfying. But what about Heather's? What is it that happened?
I think it goes back to what that guy was talking about with how he would have one of them stand in the corner because he didn't like them watching the eyes on him when he killed their friend or killed the other one, and I think killed her somehow. I mean, I don't know how. Big club. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Was he a baseball bat? I mean, what happened? Did he bun her to death? I mean, what happened?
I think it was again a missed opportunity because again you got the camera, which is just like it was a static shot at the end, where it was aiming against the wall, and you could have added in some real creepy sound effects or something just right at the end. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. What about all 3 of them screaming together?
Yeah, something. Something more than what they gave us. I mean, it's still a decent ending. I mean. It's very much out of left field with the ending, but it's just, again, I think they could have done so much more with it, but in hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than the gore ending, which is the other stuff that the studio wanted, and when they looked at it, they're like, at least somebody had the sense to go, no, that wouldn't work.
Did you actually read about what the first draft of the monster was?
No, I didn't.
It was actually, all right, you got to bear with me, a giant stick figure. I am not kidding. You can look it up on IMDb trivia right now that the original script had them being chased around the woods by a giant stick figure.
so Pumpkinhead stick figure is going to chase the Blair Witch kid? That would have been even worse. So, I think you do that in Blair Witch 5. I don't think you do that in the first one. Wow. I'm glad they changed their mind on that. God, the Wicker Man comes alive. How?
And actually, have you ever seen the Todd McFarlane Blair Witch toys?
Yeah.
What did you think about those monsters? You think it was a representation?
Yeah, they're horrible.
I mean, you got the Dracula werewolf one, and then you got the half naked tree woman.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Todd McFarlane can do some fantastic stuff, but this was a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, that was. And it's like, I look at those toys, and then it's like I kind of look back to this movie, and it's like, those don't help me. You know?
Yeah, but it doesn't explain anything either.
Yeah,
you know, the one I love, the one that has like the hair in the face. It's like Cousin It, but with the pickaxe.
Yeah,
you know,
of course, there's got to have some type of weapon. I mean, come on. I'm sure it fought against Spawn sometime, you know.
Yeah,
that could have been the third Blair Witch, you know, Spawn versus the Blair Witch.
Actually, that could have been a better version of Spawn, but that's another podcast for another day. So, well, Nick, we're at the point of the podcast where we give our final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn rating for the film. So, what are yours for the Blair Witch Project?
My first initial viewing, like I said, when I was 15, I hated this movie. I thought it was stupid. And I was almost kind of blacklisted from my family for movies for a while because everybody was in love with this movie, and I remember sitting down at dinner going, "You guys are freaking nuts." But over the years, and just, you know, kind of maybe just my maturing and just kind of like, you know, watching a lot more movies and seeing, you know, movies that like the Eli Roth movies, the Rob Zombie movie, even the new John Carpenter crap that comes out, you know, just like how movie makers that go in the exact opposite direction where they give us more and more and more, you know, the Saw movies where they're giving us gore and, you know, the monsters and stuff like that. I came to kind of appreciate what this was trying to do, where it was like, it left it up to the audience to kind of decide what was going on and what was going after these people. And I guess I actually really kind of enjoy this movie now. I mean, it does have its bad moments. It's, you know, stupidity with the map, the extreme close-up and everything. But for the most part, I think it's actually a fairly well-made movie that has real genuine scares in it. I would have to recommend this to anybody who obviously hasn't seen it. I guess for my popcorn rating for this movie, I'd have to go with a medium with some fresh extra butter on it. I mean, it's nothing great, but it's still a good movie. It's creepy, and it really was a novelty for its time. And like I said, it's kind of refreshing in a way. I mean, you get so many crappy, overdone horror movies, and a nice little refresher, almost like the original Halloween or the original Alien, or, you know, movies like that where it's just kind of down to the grim basics, you know. And that's what I enjoy. So I recommend it. Yeah.
You know, Nick, I feel very similar about this the way you do. When the first time I saw it, I didn't think there was anything big deal about it. I just thought, you know, it was there. And having not watched it again through all the way for more than a decade, watching it now, and knowing the number of films I've consumed and a lot of the modern horror that I've watched, I really do appreciate what they're trying to do here. This film has flaws. It's got major flaws in it. They're all the flaws of first-time filmmakers, though. And I think the genesis of what they've got here, the root story, is something that is really good. And the way they go about executing it, with a couple of missteps here and there, for the most part, is really solid. I mean, they got, if it's a football game plan, they got a couple turnovers in there they need to work on. But for the most part, it works. And it works in a real way. I don't think this is a movie you can watch with a group of people, though. I think you'll sit there and make fun of it, and it'll become, it's kind of like the way if you watch the movie Sling Blade. If you watch that by yourself, you have a totally different reaction to it than if you watch it with a group of friends. And I think Blair Witch Project is very much the same way. It's really good. It's got some creepy moments in it, if not downright scares. And ultimately, it works. The ending is a real bumping point for me because for years I've said that I didn't think they earned that ending. But now knowing what they were going to go with, it's by far the best option they had. and I'll say, in the end, if I'm not totally satisfied with it, I'm okay that I'm not, because I have to remind myself of the way this film is put together. Brian and I talked about this when we reviewed Donkey Punch, that we felt like the ambiguous ending of that wasn't earned by the film, that we needed to see some resolution to that. And I felt going into this, I was going to say the same thing about Blair Witch, but actually having watched it again now, I think I'm okay with the fact that it ends with really no explanation other than what the audience can put together for themselves. And the fact that the filmmakers are going to ask us to do that, I'm willing to go along with them on it. So yeah, I'm big on it. I think it should be seen. Again, probably something to watch by yourself, not with a group of people. And I'm going to go large popcorn on it. I do think it's worthy of that moniker because it is a good original idea. And gosh, when this came out in 99, I mean, how many not original ideas were there in horror movies? I mean, they were dead. And then this thing took it a different direction. So now the funny thing is, Nick, they did a sequel to it. And I don't know if you've ever seen Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, but I don't know that I could find two more disjointed sequels than we'll have in this series.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I did pick it up on Amazon used for 69 cents. So I don't know what that says about the movie, but I'm going to give it a go.
So, well, Nick, man, thanks for being here. We'll have you back again next time for Blair Witch 2.
Sounds good.
And, folks, like we teased before in the Donkey Punch episode, lots of thriller kind of scare movies. Some of the things that we just wanted to do that were a little different during this time of year. You know, we've got Donkey Punch. We're doing Blair Witch 1 and 2. And then Brian and I are topping it all off with Leprechaun 2. We're going back to visit the Leprechaun series for reasons yet to be explained that we're going to release for you right before Halloween. So you can find that again at continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. You can also check out our sister podcast, The Art of Slaying, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer retrospective over on the Buffy page, and check through our archives on Filmstrip to see the other movie retrospectives we've done. Got all kinds of stuff in there. Batman, romantic comedies, you name it. We've done a lot of variety of it. So if you want more horror, we got a little bit of that in there too. So check it out, and we're glad you're along for the ride. Until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thanks for tuning in to Filmstrip.
Thanks for listening to Filmstrip. Visit our website, continuousplaypodcast.com, for more reviews and episodes. All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.